Only 48 hours ago, we learned that BlackRock has something in common with one of our special guests today, Mr. Samson Mow. Both Samson and BlackRock think that the price of Bitcoin is drastically discounting the insanely bullish fundamentals. They believe that the gap between the lagging price and the undeniable economic reality is about to slam shut. This week, Robbie Michnick from BlackRock said that the price of Bitcoin will soon match the growing institutional adoption that they're seeing behind closed doors. Today, we brought on Samson Mow to re-explore whether the recent embrace of Bitcoin by the largest nation state on the world could be a sign that the Bitcoin price is about to catch up to the fundamentals, and why the $100,000 Omega candle could be coming sooner than you think. Today, I have assembled the most bullish panel in Bitcoin with none other than American HODL, Harry Sudock, and of course, Samson Mow. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss a beat. I am Ben with the BTC Sessions, and this is your daily session. All right. I want to welcome to the stage Mr. Harry Sudock, the American HODL, and Samson Mow is somewhere. He'll be here. He did tweet and say that he's going to be here momentarily, but punctual as usual. Gentlemen, how you doing?
Good, man. Good to be here.
Good to see you.
No bad days.
That's good. That's good. Well, I mean, in Samson's absence before he gets here, what do you guys think? Is Samson correct in saying that the price is completely disconnected from all of the awesome shit that has happened so far this year?
I mean, yeah, I mean, that seems pretty obvious, right? If you would have told me that we were going to have a strategic Bitcoin reserve, like America was going to announce their intention to stack, literally Treasury has a mandate now that they have to come up with a plan for how to stack sats, and it is illegal for them not to come up with a plan for how to stack sats, right? Like, so there's really truly crazy developments that are happening. Yeah, and if you would have told me all this was going to happen and the Bitcoin price was going to slump back down into the low 80s, I would have been like, that doesn't make sense. No, I would have called you retarded. I would have been like, there's no fucking way. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. But here we are, and of course, Bitcoin makes fools of us all, and I'm the one who looks retarded. So, you know,
I mean,
that's just par for the course.
Yeah, it comes with the territory. Every Bitcoiner looks a little retarded from time to time, right? Harry, I don't know. What do you think? Are you kind of dismayed at where we're sitting at currently, given all, like, it's been a crazy beginning of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I try to always look back at like the history of other technologies to inform my view on Bitcoin and view on, you know, there's two things. There's like the proliferation of Bitcoin, the technology, and then there's the networked adoption of using Bitcoin, the technology. So like there's always, I think about like the internet, right? Like this is, I'm not covering new ground here particularly, but like the invention of the internet had like 7 nodes on the network, and 3 of them were in Utah and 2 of them were in California. And so you saw like this very rudimentary line chart, and now before there was no internet, and now there is internet. And then there were all of these internet enabled services like email and all these other things that got rolled out on top of it. And, you know, I try to think if like what would have happened in 1987, the government was like, we are going to only use email for any correspondence going forward. And if you don't onboard to email, you will be left behind in all of the mechanisms that involve you receiving information. And, you know, and I think of it in that way as like, there's hundreds of thousands of households and hundreds of millions of people who are not onboarded to Bitcoin in any way, shape, or form. And the government is basically saying the number 0 is the wrong one. Every other number is reasonably meaningful, but we know that 0 is the wrong one. And so you look at all the purchasing power controlled by the people who are being sent that message. Oh, and by the way, it's not just the households domestically that are getting sent that message. It's every hedge fund manager. It's every sovereign wealth manager. It's every other government all across the world being told zero's wrong. I'm not sure what's right, but zero's really wrong. And so, I think it's creating a fundamental and paradigm shifting relationship with the asset, where before there were a few internet psychos, like perhaps the 3, soon to be 4 of us, who had arrived at the conclusion that owning no Bitcoin is the wrong number of Bitcoin. But now there's just a permission structure for all of these people who, if they bought Bitcoin and Bitcoin went down, they get fired. That was the math previously, was if I buy Bitcoin, I lose my job. Now the math is if I own 0 Bitcoin, I might lose my job. And that fundamental change, it maybe doesn't create maxis of us all, but there's always got to be those of us who have to be the tip of the spear, and the shaft will follow.
Well, I'm going to also bring in our 4th here. He's been waiting in the wings patiently, but Mr. Samson Mow, it looks a little dark there. Can you hear us?
Yep, I think wrong camera.
Oh, there we go. We got you now. We got you.
Okay.
Sounding crispy. How you doing, man? Good to see you.
Good.
You missed my little preamble, but I did mark the occasion by bringing my Omega candle. So
I got one too.
There we go. they're very sensually packaged, might I say. But we were just discussing a little bit about how back in February you were chatting a little bit about how you thought the price is not very reflective of how many insane things have come to fruition through even just the first part of this year. And just a couple days ago, we had somebody from BlackRock kind of echoing that sentiment, saying, listen, the value of Bitcoin is not at all being reflected in the price action right now, and that gap may soon be closing. And so I was just wondering your reflections on kind of where we're at, all of the stuff that has happened, and maybe why we haven't quite seen that reflected in the price as of yet.
Well, I guess it just takes time for people to figure things out. I wrote an article on Twitter or on X about this, and it's like people were kind of expecting the executive order calling for the creation of the SPR or creating the SPR would kind of kick things off right away. But I think your average man on the street doesn't have any idea what's going on. They're not following the developments. They're not following the news. They're not aware of anything. I think fund managers are probably more aware, but it takes time for them to also move and get things going and to set up the processes that allow them to buy. And that's why I think ETFs, MicroStrategy, and MicroStrategy derivatives are sort of a shortcut path to that. And that can allow people to get in much faster. But in general, it takes a lot of time to gear up and pass the laws that are needed to start the whole process. And unfortunately, most of the world is waiting for things to signify that it is time, or actually a better way to say it, to signify it's too late, because that's the point at which there is no career risk. And I think Harry was mentioning something like that, right? Like there is this concept of career risk, which is if you do something with Bitcoin, then you're at risk. But the inverse is starting to become the new norm, which is if you don't do something with Bitcoin, your career is at risk. But yeah, it takes them a lot of time to kind of get there. And I think it's just a slow process. And the real price of Bitcoin is probably something like 200,000 right now, but we're not even there yet. And I believe it's just a matter of people reconciling that, the reality of what's happening with the actual price. And usually that happens in a very violent manner when there's such a big disconnect. But right now you see like a lot of analysts, and they're all kind of mid-curve. It's always like this. Like when things happen in a certain way, they kind of say it's going to keep happening in this way. So like when we dipped to 70 something, I saw a lot of people saying, okay, we're going to go to 50. So we just had a big drawdown of 30 some odd percent or 30%. And now your mid-curve take is we're going to go lower, right? because you're fearful and you can't see anything past your own fear. And right now we're kind of like in this period of consolidation crab market. And I saw some new mid curve takes, which is we'll have 8 to 12 months of more sideways chop. I mean, that's just not reading the macroeconomic trends or reading anything. That's just your own personal bias and fear speaking.
Lots of mid-curvers. And again, I think that your average retail individual is still so asleep. I've got so few of I had a little bit in the post 100K of like, hey, you still into that Bitcoin thing? Kind of curious and everything, but it's been a friggin' ghost town. Despite the fact that, I mean, like we feel kind of about 80 plus K, which is wild to me. But nonetheless, you know, like, yeah, retail is completely asleep. They have no, I mean, kind of obviously, but nonetheless, gentlemen, we want to kind of dive into your reasons for being bullish. That's the reason why we are here. And so, Harry, I'm gonna toss it to you to kind of tee us off here first. And I'm curious, what's been on your mind? What are you excited about? Why are you bullish?
I'll talk my book, happily so. I'm bullish because right now we're running 5% of global hash rate right here in the US at CleanSpark, because we're printing between 600 and 700 Bitcoin a month, because we're continuing to retain that on our balance sheet, and because we've arranged an entire business that's just designed to generate Bitcoin native revenue. And the ability to generate Bitcoin native revenue irrespective of price, but totally dependent on global difficulty and the security model of Bitcoin. Like, these are the things that get me super, super fired up, is that I'm watching in real time the integration between Bitcoin security model and energy prosperity all over the country. I'm watching the direct integration where rural American communities are getting bolstered by the Bitcoin network through our purchase of electricity, that those levers of prosperity have never been more constructive and greater able to meet the moment in front of us. And so the American people are going to benefit from Bitcoin held on our federal balance sheet. Because at the end of the day, you just take the number of Bitcoin we own, divide by 350 million. That's your stake in the future. Oh, and by the way, we're going to generate massive revenues for your local utility to help you benefit from all of the things that the Bitcoin network does best, every step of the way, block by block. That type of integration and that type of relationship between rural America, the return to manufacturing, the health of the federal balance sheet, and the prosperity of the individual taxpayer, that symbiotic flywheel is all built on the back of what Satoshi gave us.
I love that. I'm really curious. What's the initial, when you guys go and you go to a local provider, electricity provider, and you say something like, "Hey, this is what we want to do." What's that initial talk like, and how does that progress over time?
I think that it's got sort of 3 stages to it. The first is they've never met a customer like us being the Bitcoin network, right? We have no geographical constraint. So typically, if I were going to go build a big manufacturing plant that consumes X hundreds of megawatts in a rural location, that would typically go hand in hand with, they need to build transmission, they need to invest in their highways, they need to have the school systems and the hospital systems to support 2,000 jobs. You know, there's all this other sort of knock-on effect that the companies are asking for the communities to bear the cost of. Bitcoin miners have no geographical constraint, have no population or infrastructure constraint. We want to go as close to the substation or the power plant as we possibly can get, and we just want to plug in. We don't want to introduce any other burdens or costs to these communities, because ultimately we understand the symbiotic nature of the relationship and how that has to happen. So one is they don't believe us, right? They don't believe that we can actually go anywhere and cut off power anytime. And so we got to go and show them data. We say, all right, here's a stack of power bills that we paid in Georgia or in Tennessee or in Wyoming. And we'll just show you all of the data, the runtime data and the power bills, and we'll prove to you that it actually happens. The second is they don't believe how quickly we can build as miners. So typically, if you get a big data center, big power plant, customer that's coming in, I always use the automotive example because I think it's kind of the most common. They say, okay, well, maybe we'll start pulling the power down in 2 to 4 years. We're like, all right, 6 to 9 months. We're ready to go. So they don't believe that we can go anywhere and shut off anytime. They don't believe that we can build as quickly as we are able to and able to start to pass those revenues back through the power costs as quickly as we're able to at the scale that we're able to. And then the third is all of their friends who are the utility executives nearby just start calling and saying, can we have one too? So what we're doing a little differently than some of the other miners that you probably heard of are running 32 data centers. We're not running 2 or 3 at these hyperscale campuses. We're running little pockets of power all over the place, and that lets us stay nimble. It lets us stay aggressive around growth, and it means that Bitcoin's plugging in to more and more local economies all over the country and bolstering, the backbone of what they already do incredibly well, which is serve power, build additional power, and we know the relationship between high reliability, low cost megawatt hours and all of the other biomarkers of human flourishing. The correlation is 1-to-1. Childhood nutrition, education, literacy, pick your poison on how you best measure the health of a society. More energy equals better outcomes. More Bitcoin equals more energy equals better outcomes. The transitive property is unbroken.
I want to open it up to Hodl and Samson if you guys want to either tag on to what Harry's talking about, or if you have any questions for him regarding it. I don't know if you guys want to tap in here.
Yeah, I think the thing that was coming up for me when I was listening to Harry speak was it's just Bitcoin is a cheat code. Bitcoin is a superpower. If you have Bitcoin, you can add it to fucking anything. It's like MSG. It makes everything taste good. You just sprinkle a little Bitcoin on everything and suddenly everything's better. And it's like, whatever your business model is, I guarantee it'll benefit with Bitcoin, right? Whatever your business is, I guarantee it'll benefit with Bitcoin. Whatever country you live in, I guarantee Bitcoin will help it out, And so it really is this thing where Bitcoiners are kind of like super powered individuals with extreme agency who go out and do these things in the environment, in the world. And they're doing things that are, askew to the current paradigm. And it kind of breaks people's brains because you shouldn't be able to do these things this fast, this well, this cheap, this efficiently, etc.
Yeah. Samson, how about yourself? Anything you want to tag on or ask Harry about?
Well, the mining aspect is pretty bullish right now. I mean, you're seeing this trend of mining companies, especially public ones, that just never need to sell anymore. They can borrow. And that changes the dynamic greatly. I mean, yes, there is concern about centralization of hash rate in the country, but the benefit of that is that you have a lot of US public company miners that just don't need to sell anymore. And that changes that entire calculus of mining profitability, right? Does it really matter how profitable you are? To a certain extent, but it doesn't matter as much as it did, let's say, 10 years ago, when miners are trying to just eke by. But now they have all these different instruments at their disposal, and it kind of reduces the supply of Bitcoin. And you compound that with nation states mining too. And for a lot of them, they're behind the meter. They don't really care about the cost of electricity, or they're just using excess electricity. So the entire game is just completely different now. And that's why I'm bullish on mining.
I love that. Here in Alberta, we've got a fair amount. We've got Steve Barber up this way with Upstream Data, and he's doing great things. And We've got Hut 8 has a couple of sites in southern Alberta. Luxor, I believe, is based out of here as well. There's a bunch of people in Alberta, which makes sense because again, they're kind of plugging into just a lot of the waste that happens, and especially because we don't have transmission. We don't have the pipelines and stuff like that, and we're not getting natural gas out of here in an efficient manner. So what are we doing? We're just flaring it. And so like you go, and on top of that, they've imposed all these carbon taxes and everything. So like, what's the next best thing to do? Of course, you're just gonna just use that energy and recoup those losses, and it turns into a positive. So yeah, I mean, it just makes sense. And in a way, the government here has directly incentivized it even more so. So I mean, yeah, it's incredibly bullish. And from the thing that I'll tag on here is mining was always very much a blind spot for me. I just never really got any sort of exposure to it or tried it in any way. But I'm loving the fun home hobbyist miner, the bit axes, the future bits, the nerd axe, the brains mini miner, all that stuff. I'm having a lot of fun with that, and I love that that's a thing that people are beginning to use as just like a learning mechanism at home. And it's also really cool seeing people seeing the odd person actually hit a block. I saw the hat, what was it called, at Bitcoin Park when the guys, they hit a block. What was it called? What did they call the fundraiser? It wasn't a fundraiser. It was a
the telehash.
The telehash. Yes. What a great moment. That was awesome. Were you there for that, Harry?
I was.
Were you?
Unbelievable. This is why, like,
that? Because some people might not know what that was.
Absolutely. So Rod, who runs Bitcoin Park and is based in Nashville with me, through a fundraiser for an open source mining not-for-profit that he and Eco and Econo Alchemist launched, called the 256 Foundation. And they did the fundraiser where instead of donating sats or dollars, people donated hash rate. And they did it all through, I think they did it through public pool, but I need to double check what pool they used. But it was all basically solo mined out of a single location. And they hit a block, and they were running maybe they got 800 petahash donated, which is a lot of hash rate, but but not enough to hit a block within the window of time. And they hit a block like an hour and a half in. And so they generated over 300 grand worth of sats for the foundation, which is a huge amount of runway for them. And so they're going to be able to plow all that money back into open source mining, further decentralization of the proof of work network that we all rely on. So incredibly bullish moment seeing them win a block. And, this is an underrated thing, I think, in Bitcoin, is that, we're living through mythology in real time, right? So you see stories about the Greek gods, or the heroes of the past, Achilles, pick your heroic figure. The Bitcoin movement that we're seeing happen around us, these are the moments that the future is going to look back on as the same Greek myths and Greek gods that we look back on to learn lessons from antiquity, to learn about strength and honor and these core fundamental human achievement ideas. And so seeing that moment happen, is part of this mythology. They want to contribute back to the open source nature of the Bitcoin network. And so of course they want to block when they had no likelihood of doing so, because there's a predestination to doing the right thing for the thing that takes such good care of all of us, that positive sum relationship gets rewarded for being positive sum at its foundational sort of level. And so, why do we need to be bullish? Because the universe has aligned itself to arrive at this incredibly prosperous outcome that we're all going to get to benefit from.
I love that. And I'll just say it was I mean, watching Scott's reaction as was incredible. I'm excited to see Scott. I'm headed down to Mining Disrupt in Fort Lauderdale on Monday, so I'll be there earlier in the week. But I'm doing a fireside chat with Scott 9000, who was the basically running the BitAxe project. But anybody that's looking to just dip your toes in, learn about hobbyist home mining, these BitAxe things are badass. And yeah, you can look on if you look on the channel, you can find a tutorial. It's super easy, actually, just to kind of get playing and learn about mining at home that way. So nonetheless, gentlemen,
hey, Ben,
yeah,
I'll see you there.
Oh, are you going? Nice.
Yeah,
Awesome.
let's get lunch or something.
Yes, let's absolutely do that. I love it. Okay. Awesome. Well, gentlemen, we're going to do a rotation here now. Before we do, we're going to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. One of them's in the room. But either way, we're going to do a quick sponsor shout out, and then we will be right back in a moment. I'm Hodl. I'm coming to you next. Everybody in the chat, everybody watching live, please do give that like button smash if you're enjoying the conversation. We'll be back in just a moment. Looking for a simple and secure way to manage your Bitcoin on mobile? AQUA Wallet has you covered. It's user-friendly and puts you in full control of your Bitcoin with secure self-custody. AQUA also supports Lightning and Liquid Network, making fast, cheap Bitcoin payments and asset transfers easier than ever. Plus, it even supports stablecoins, giving you ultimate flexibility. Built on open source code, AQUA is transparent, trustworthy, and perfect for beginner and pros alike. Ready to upgrade your Bitcoin experience? Click the link in the show notes or scan the QR code on the screen now to download AQUA Wallet today. Securing your Bitcoin doesn't have to be complicated or invasive. With NUNCHUK's HONEYBADGER plan, you get state-of-the-art multisig with built-in inheritance planning and no KYC required. NUNCHUK is trusted by users to secure billions of dollars in Bitcoin. The HONEYBADGER plan offers 204 assisted multisig, guiding you step-by-step on mobile or desktop. It works seamlessly with hardware wallets like TapSigner, ColdCard, Jade, and plenty of others, so you're always in control. Plus, with non-KYC inheritance planning, you can ensure your Bitcoin goes to your loved ones. No private info needed. Take control of your Bitcoin today. Click the link in the show notes or scan the QR code on the screen to check out the HONEYBADGER plan. CoinKite has been in the game for years, creating hands down the best and most secure hardware when it comes to securing your Bitcoin. The ColdCard Q is an absolute powerhouse and my daily driver, and it's ideal for newcomers and advanced users alike. The TapSigner gives you a low-cost, user-friendly option for those just getting started or for convenience when traveling. You can head to coinkite.com and use code BTCSessions for discounts, or simply scan the QR code on the screen to get started right away. All right, we are back in. And by the way, if anybody wants a nice little 5% discount on a cold card, it's a QR code on the side of the screen. Feel free to scan. But we're going to dive right back in. Hodl, I'm looking at you. Why are you bullish, man? What's going on?
Dude, how can I pick anything except for the strategic Bitcoin reserve? Like, the strategic Bitcoin reserve is one of the most bullish things I've seen in my entire time in Bitcoin. And like, yeah, there's a big difference between how normies perceive it and how Bitcoiners perceive it, because Bitcoiners have been waiting for things like this to start happening for the better part of a decade, even longer than that. And I, to me, when I saw it happen, and then I saw the way it sort of, the reception to it was kind of like, huh, what? Like Rachel Maddow was on her show analogizing it to a Beanie Baby reserve, right? Like, what do we need stupid Beanie Babies for, right? It reminded me of a Sputnik moment, right? Like when Sputnik flew overhead, that was a really big deal. But the American public's perception of it was, back at that time in the what would it have been? Early 1960s, late 1950s. The government told everybody on the radio and television to go out tonight and look at Sputnik, everybody. It's going to be amazing, whatever. And then what the average person in America saw is they looked up and there was this like little light that went above their head for a fraction of a second. And they all just turned to each other like, that's it? That's what we're supposed to be excited about or whatever. But obviously this was a very big deal, because for millions of years, humanity had been staring up at the heavens, and there had been separation between us and it, the celestial bodies. And now we had pierced the veil, and our technological supremacy was growing, and rocketry was going from this thing that was like, sort of a niche hobbyist activity to, within 10 years, it was going to put a man on the moon. We were going to have ICBMs. It was going to be a core part of our national strategic defense and infrastructure, et cetera. So like, it was a really, really big moment. And what was interesting is there was a public disconnect where the public didn't understand what was going on at all, but every government around the world immediately understood what had just happened. And I think that's the same thing. So Sputnik kicked off the space race. I think the SBR just kicked off the SAT race. And you now realize that Bitcoin is no longer optional. You are forced into the Bitcoin paradigm, just like rocketry, advanced rocketry was no longer optional after Sputnik. You are now forced into this. Otherwise, you don't want your enemies to own the future, right? And so the minute the SBR got signed, every central bank head, every finance minister, every president in the world had this dossier dropped on their desk that said Bitcoin is strictly limited to 21 million. There will never be any more Bitcoin. Bitcoin is digital gold. Like, it had all these amazing things in it that are, of course, true, and the things we say to each other all the time. But now, people in extreme positions of power across the globe had to reckon with this, had to deal with this, right? So not only did it cause this shift in perception, just like Sputnik did, but it also is going to create this wave of innovation, adoption, and if you look at like where the future is going, I think the soft war thesis that Jason Lowery has talked about, like in whole or in part, there's something there that's real, and I think the government is going to get involved in mining and infra and ASICs, chip fabrication, like et cetera, like, because this is going to be strategically important for global economies around the world going forward. There is no world in which Bitcoin doesn't become the global money. And like, of course, a bunch of crazed libertarians thought that meant that we were going to dissolve all structures. And yeah, we do dissolve all structures, because a Bitcoin enabled and Bitcoin powered government is not the same as a fiat enabled and fiat powered government. So yeah, we are dissolving the structure, but it doesn't mean nothing stands in its place and we all just go live in the woods and drink raw milk, like straight from the cow. That's how it's going to happen, right? Like, there will be a new government, a Bitcoin government, that is going to stand in the place of the fiat government at some point. Like, the horse is already through the gates of Troy. There's no going back at this point. And the fight that we all, I think it was deflating for some Bitcoiners who kind of considered themselves like martyrs in some sense, because people have been gearing up for a fight with the government for 10 years that is now not going to happen. It's just straight up not going to happen. And of course, that's de-risked it for the big money to come in and be able to make meaningful, like well-sized investments in this thing. But there's not going to be this big showdown. And for 10 years, I would go around talking about Bitcoin and everybody would say like, what happens when the government bans it? It's like, well, the government owns it. It's strategically important now. So that conversation is meaningless. The number one fight item on everyone's mind is now gone. So yeah, I mean, like, fuck, it's really bullish. And it's kind of crazy to me that people are just like, oh, it's just like whatever. It's like ceremonial. It's like a token SBR. No, it's a real SBR. There's going to be incremental new buying attached to it. Anybody who's saying the opposite is fully out to lunch or delusional or doesn't understand what's happening. I saw some real bad takes about that on the internet. So like, yeah, man, this is it's a big fucking deal. I don't know how to get this. This is a pre and post moment. That's how big of a deal this is. So if you're not bullish about this, you are asleep. Your head is in the sand.
Well, this makes, again, to Samson's point earlier, the mid curvers, those are the ones that are going to be left in the dust, and probably the ones that are the most bitter about it are the mid curvers, right? You've got, you're having people at kind of each end of a spectrum kind of clue in to Bitcoin first, right? The people right now that we're seeing with the strategic reserve and a lot of the institutions, these are the people whose job it is to preserve purchasing power, to protect the fruits of the labors of many people. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got people that are kind of the most disenfranchised, that are using it as like a censorship resistant against totalitarian regime type thing. But the people in the middle, unless you're fucking weird like all of us are are the ones that are missing it and that don't get at all and that make these Beanie Baby analogies. These are the people that are going to be the most pissed that they missed it and going to be probably, you know, in the midterm, the most disenfranchised from that shift of power. But I kind of love that, and I want to give a shout out to actually one of my friends that's literally in the chat right now. But it just makes me think of the people that were most kind of, again, those mid curvers that were most cautious about things, that were like, well, I don't know, maybe I'll buy a tiny little bit here and there. I'll wait for the price to be the right price and all that kind of stuff. And then there's my good friend Dave, and he's the kind of guy that if he is going to do something, there's no hesitation. It's like head first, straight into it, for better or worse. And he was one of the people where initially when I got into Bitcoin, he hated it. He was like, fuck this stuff. I hate this so much. But as soon as he got it, he was like, all right, we're going. I'm coming in with wads of cash and buying OTC and stacking sats like nobody's business. And he, in contrast with some of my other friends that are like, have good jobs, that were like, carving out like high-end occupation, kind of setting up their lives in certain ways that were like, I don't know, that seems pretty risky. Well, they got screwed, and Dave's laughing, and he's living his best life now, and he's starting a family, which congrats, he just had his first, but he's now building a family with the generational wealth that he was able to accumulate because he saw something and he just pulled that trigger. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing globally with certain groups of people that have the wherewithal to do it, that aren't overthinking it. So, I mean, Samson, Harry, I don't know, you guys can jump in here too.
Yeah, I agree largely with Hodl. Like, the SBR was huge, and then there's like a contingent. I don't know if they're mid-curvers or they're just really, really perfectionists on Bitcoin adoption, but it was like, we got the SBR, but yeah, they're not buying. It's just they're keeping what they've got. And they might buy later, but I don't really care because they didn't do it now. It's just like there's just this need for instant gratification of a fully delivered package of everything you want, all tied up with a bow. And that's not really how the world works. You have to go step by step. There is a sequence in order to get things through. And I don't think people really understand that. It's also the same with nation state adoption. People are like, oh, how many countries did you get? I'm like, it's not like I go to Walmart and I buy a toaster. There's a lot of variables and a lot of things changing that don't make it so simple. But it's the same for SBR. Like, they're just sleeping on the fact that it's a seismic change and it's a seismic shift. Now, there is one bearish part of that, which Hodl was saying, they can't ban it, but they can ban you from having it, right? There is precedent that we can have gold as the government, but you can't have gold as a pleb. So, that's why you want to make sure you have your Bitcoin too.
Yeah.
I'm going to escalate aggressively.
Do it.
Good.
So Hodl, respectfully, fuck your Sputnik moment. That's not what this is. This is the equivalent of the origins of the joint stock company coming into fruition. So the origins of the joint stock company there's a Chinese equivalent, but I'm going to use the European version. They were companies that were designed and launched around a single voyage, where you had an exploring partner and you had financing partners. And a bunch of really rich people in Europe would put their money together. They would buy or lease a ship. They would have a seafaring, thumos-driven, aggressive person to lead an expedition. They would go out, they would acquire spoils that were fundamentally unavailable to the European world. And this was the reason why America was discovered, was the innovation in financing structures. Because Christopher Columbus, 170 years after the Joint Stock Corporation concept was birthed, got on a boat with somebody else's money and discovered America and created hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of value out of that one financial innovation. So the relationship between fundamental financial innovation and the prosperity of the entire world being upended for decades, generation, and millennia to come, we have precedent that financial innovation equals the fundamental opening of markets and prosperity for billions of people. We didn't invent that with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just the current most prosperous version of this timeline getting birthed to tens of billions of people, because I believe that the future generations will have so many more children, offspring, and the prosperity available to them will just be foundationally greater. If you were born in 1480, America didn't exist to you in Europe. If you were born in 1510, it did. And so that's what we've seen. If you were born in 2007, you lived in a monetarily unsound world. If you were born in 2009, sound money existed for your entire lifetime. And that's the same type of progressive, innovative backbone that Bitcoin is going to offer to 1,000 years of our children and our children's children. And if you're not viewing this type of step function innovation across the financial system and reading through what that type of innovation can mean to billions of people, you're asleep at the wheel.
I love the, again, what you've said about at a certain point, there's a new generation of people who have never known any different. And same with like those of us, you know, with the kids in the room here, you know, my daughter, she's turning 8 this summer. She's never existed in a world where Bitcoin didn't also exist. She gets her allowance in Bitcoin into her Lightning wallet. She goes to our local market when we have them, and she uses her Bitcoin at the local merchants and pays in Lightning. And everybody's like, who's this kid who knows how to use a Bitcoin wallet? And I'm just figuring it out, and I'm 40. And so there's going to be this snowball effect of people that are just, well, of course, this is the way it is. It's just always, why would I use this thing where somebody can tell me no in using my money when I can just use the money? It's like, it's all internet native. I don't give a shit. I'm not going to use that. I'm going to hold my own money just fine. And so I think people don't realize how quickly that moment is coming, because, and not to mention the fact that Bitcoiners are mating like rabbits. And so there's going to be a large influx of Bitcoiner teenagers that are getting their allowance in Bitcoin and that are beginning to use it and save in Bitcoin. And, you know, Bitcoiners are teaching the you know, delaying gratification to their kids so that they can actually save the fruits of their labor, save their allowance, and delay that gratification so that they can save for later, rather than this culture of just spend everything that comes in and doom spend to oblivion. I think we're about to see this monumental shift just in general ethos of how we live our lives, and it's coming quick. Yeah. There's a Columbus hater in the chat, by the way.
By the way, Harry's right. Harry's right that Bitcoin is colonizer capital. I 100% agree with you. No, except for this time we're not colonizing indigenous tribes. We're colonizing space, okay? And so, yeah, we might kill some aliens. We might, you know what I mean? Step on some microbes, but it'll be okay. We need the space. Trillions of humans across the galaxy.
We'll bring blankets.
Type whatever. 9. Let's go, you know?
Fantastic. All right, gentlemen, we're going to go for a second rotation here. Everybody that's watching live, you know, we've had a few thousand viewers live across all platforms. Thanks for joining in. We're keeping it going. If you're in the live chat on YouTube, make sure you smash that like button. If you're enjoying the conversation so far, we appreciate you being here. And on the other side of the jump, we're going to do a quick sponsor shout out here, but we're also going to give away some free sats. So if you got a Lightning wallet handy, pull it out because we're going to have a QR code where you can scoop up some free sats in just a moment. So we'll see you guys in a sec. Be right back. And Samson, afterwards, I'm coming for you.
All right.
Bitcoin Well is the best place to be buying and selling Bitcoin in Canada and the US. And now with Bitcoin Well Infinite, it's also the best place to be making large buys at their OTC desk of over $50,000. Their white glove service gives you fast transactions, no slippage, and the lowest fees. You can scan the QR code on the screen or simply head to bitcoinwell.com/btcsessions to sign up today. And you can share your own personalized referral link to earn commissions. Are you ready to level up your Bitcoin mining game? Mining Disrupt is the world's largest Bitcoin mining conference and expo, and it's happening March 25th through 27th, 2025 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Network with industry leaders, discover cutting-edge hardware, and gain insights from world-class speakers. Plus, enjoy exclusive events like the Cigar Lounge and pre-party for meaningful connections. I'll be there, and I'd love to see you. Use the link in the show notes or scan the QR code on the screen right now to receive 20% off your tickets. Don't miss out. DEBIFI is the best and easiest way to borrow against your Bitcoin in a non-custodial way. Funds are held in a multisig escrow where you hold a key, and the platform allows for excellent hardware like the Cold Card Mark IV and the Q. You have access to flexible conditions, the best rates, and institutional grade liquidity. If you're looking to make use of your capital, don't sell your Bitcoin, borrow against it. You can head over to debifi.com to check them out, or simply scan the QR code on the screen. All right, we are back in, and anybody who has their Lightning wallet handy, I'm here on bitcoinwell.com, and great place to stack sats, by the way, in Canada and the US. They're linked down below, but if you have a Lightning wallet, all you need to do is scan that QR code first, and you're going to steal 2,100 sats away from everybody else in the room. The way it works is when you sign up, buy Bitcoin, refer friends. Well, you earn points, and every time you use those points, you can toss them in the Bitcoin wishing well and have a chance to win up to 1 million sats. So if you win, let us know in the chat. We'd love to hear it. And as a side note, I'll also say if anybody's heading to Mining Disrupt, there's a QR code over there on the side that'll get you 20% off tickets. That's coming up on the 25th, 26th, and 27th. So next week. So very last minute, but get into town. It should be a good time. I'm going to be there. The team from Simply Bitcoin's going to be there. Samson's going to be there. We're going to be having lunch. And yeah, it'll be a good time. Anyways, gentlemen, we're going to continue on. And by the way, everybody in the chat, smash that like button. But Samson, I'm coming to you, and the same question everybody gets: why are you bullish?
Well, why wouldn't you be bullish? I mean, even before all this stuff is happening, I think the people that have been around for a while have always been bullish. Like, Bitcoin is just so transformational that it is hard to disregard it in any way whatsoever. And if you really understand it, I think you see the transformation potential, which is now coming to light and being more obvious to everyone else. But I guess right now, there are so many factors that right now you have I think the real beginnings of nation state adoption. So while El Salvador did become the first Bitcoin country, it is still very small relative to, the US and many other countries. So I think the impact was not as profound because people are kind of writing it off. Like, okay, a small country is doing something. But, with the US really going all in with the SBR, with the talk of their version of Bitcoin bonds, the Bit bonds, and with all the nation state mining, I think, like, again, I talked about earlier, the calculus has completely changed. It's just a different equation completely now. So in my view, the ETFs were a critical unlock factor. And that was removing the blockage from TradFi money flowing into Bitcoin. Pre-ETF, you always had run-ups, and the run-ups would kind of fizzle out because the exchanges would be overloaded. They couldn't KYC and onboard fast enough. But with ETFs, there is no barrier now. The portal to TradFi capital is wide open. And you already see people taking advantage of that, like entities such as central banks and pension funds that are buying either ETFs or like MicroStrategy. So the exposure to Bitcoin is just a click now. It's like in your Robinhood trading account or whatever you want. So there is no barrier to capital inflow. Now, with the SBR, you have this sort of endorsement from the most powerful country on the planet so far. And that is really big. Like Hodl was saying, all these politicians, they're getting this dossier now saying, Bitcoin is going to be put into a reserve and they're going to buy more. And there are all these things happening. So they kind of have to take action. And we talked about it earlier. The career risk is just gone now. And it's actually inverted, that you have to have some sort of Bitcoin strategy, or else you're putting national security at risk. And I think that is starting to play out, because some of the conversations that we've been having at Jan 3 have accelerated. We've had a lot of conversations, and they're kind of slow. They're waiting for this signal to say it's okay, which is kind of unfortunate when you think about it, because the countries that need Bitcoin the most to kind of catch up or get out of debt, they are probably the least willing to do something. But now, I think with the US telegraphing intentions to do a lot of Bitcoin-related activities and accumulation, it's changed a lot. So some timetables have been moved up. Some conversations that we're talking about doing something in 2026, they moved it up a year. I think they'll keep moving it up as things progress. But the general sentiment is there is some feeling of urgency now. And I believe the intent to acquire 3 million some odd Bitcoin from Cynthia Lummis's Bitcoin Act, coupled with the BitBond proposal, it's probably not really felt or understood yet, but it will be felt and it will be understood. But 3 million Bitcoin is something like 14-15% of supply. If you factor in lost coins, it goes up to something like 19%. And that's just from one country. So there's just not enough Bitcoin to go around. And it's also a problem that countries don't yet understand, that there is a hard limit, because everyone's been living in fiat land for so long, where if you need money, it just materializes. If you make a mistake, you can undo your mistake by printing some more money to, patch it over. But there's just this absolute limit with Bitcoin that I don't think fully registers for normal people, retail investors, and for politicians and leaders of countries. But this is all going to reconcile, and it's going to reconcile very quickly. And you have, at the same time, this nation-state adoption starting to move forward, MicroStrategy trying to buy more. The ETFs are buying more. And I think MicroStrategy alone has taken off two times, or maybe close to 3 times the amount of supply that will be mined in all of 2025. So Omega candles are coming. I just can't see it not happening. I just don't see us hovering at 80, 90, 100. I think we'll see a very violent move to the upside, and then suddenly retail is going to be interested, because now it's FOMO season, and retail seems to only really understand FOMO.
What is your take in and around the IMF's influence in regards to a seeming lack of countries following suit with El Salvador over that period of time? Do you think that in the background there was pressure there for anybody that was looking at that? Because it seemed like there was interest out the gate, and then it's very clear, like and who knows whether Bukele's been pretty vocal about how they're going to continue to stack sats, but I guess we will see how that plays out over the course of the year. But do you think that they were in the background the whole time saying, hey, there's I think 94 countries have loans with the IMF? Were they basically firing a warning shot to all of them?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And we do see that. We were engaged with the Central Bank of Suriname, and our proposal was just a very conservative 1% allocation. And we talked to them for months. We went there to meet with them in person. And then a week later, the World Bank went to visit, and then they just stopped talking. So you do see covert pressure being exerted. I'm not sure if you remember, but shortly after El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender, Honduras, the central bank, kind of randomly put out a notice saying, yeah, we're never going to do anything like that. And we had heard some rumblings that there were some people visiting at that time to exert pressure too. So there's a lot of this covert operations going on to suppress Bitcoin adoption in these countries that do have loans, and these organizations that exist to provide the loans engage with. So, you know, if your job is to loan out money and keep countries in debt, then I think your incentive is to prevent them from ever getting out of debt. So the answer is yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the Confessions of an Economic Hitman playbook, right? Like the anybody who hasn't read it, effectively they send people in, offer that countries that have resources these loans that they don't expect them to be able to pay back, and as soon as they start to struggle to make payments, they'll say, well, we can just take some of your resources instead, and then they'll get, they'll re-sign a new loan, but there'll be all these conditions of like, okay, you're only allowed to build infrastructure that allows us to extract your resources, and it just continues to snowball. And if you deny the loan, or you say you don't want it, then oftentimes you're on the other end of a bullet. And so it's not, like they masquerade as these people that are trying to go around and help these countries out of tough spots. But when you look at the track record, it's horrendous. Like either they are the worst at what they do, or they're intentionally ruining all of these countries. And, if you read Gladstein's book, Hidden Repression, you will be screaming at the pages, listening to some of the garbage that they've done in some of these shit deals. But I don't know.
Yeah, but if you think about what can happen in the future, let's say the IMF does realize that Bitcoin is not going away, then their incentive would be to structure future agreements that they not only extract natural resources, but extract Bitcoin. So they can stipulate that if you mine Bitcoin, all Bitcoin goes to them. And unless you default, then you kind of have to play along with that game. So it's almost like you have to default at this point before things escalate further, and you're really locking everyone up in that country forever into debt slavery. So I could see like a lot of countries just saying, yeah, we default. Like, what you gonna do? And then just reboot on a Bitcoin standard, because if they think far enough ahead, that is where it's going to go. You're going to have volcano mining to pay the IMF instead of that money going to the people. So it's almost like the ethical thing to do is to default at this point before things go on to a sound money standard.
Yeah, I want to get takes from Harry and Hodl here. So, gentlemen, do you want to tag on to this?
Well, the funniest thing is, wasn't the IMF telling America recently, like, not to buy Bitcoin because it might destabilize our economy? And it's like, hey, I don't remember fucking asking you. Shut the fuck up. Why do you think you get to speak to me? What the fuck? It's like,
there's the ECB and the ECB, and like they were complaining, yeah, it's going to destabilize our economic sovereignty or whatever. Right. And now they're fast tracking their CBDC because govern me harder, daddy. Right? Like that's their stance.
Yeah, it's.
I try to lean on.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, the economic hitman thing is totally accurate, and Bitcoin breaks the yoke that we have over some of these countries, or some of these international funds have over some of these countries, and they don't want that. They don't want people to leave the plantation, and if one person stands up and says, I am Spartacus, then everybody stands up and says, I am Spartacus, and then it's over,
I lean on the infinite wisdom of our friend, Francis Poulier, and I tell them, cry harder. Right? At the end of the day, let's say they're right and we crash our economy. Okay? We did so with free will and free spirit and free sovereignty. You're a non-sovereign actor trying to tell us what to do, how to run our lives. No, not you, not anyone can step into that role to do that. It's not how this works. And at the end of the day, there's a hierarchy of seigniorage that they have inserted themselves into. And so they have offloaded seigniorage capabilities to the US, and they've said, we can't subjugate the United States. We're going to subjugate the global South on the back of the US dollar hegemony. And the goal of Bitcoin is not necessarily, to break the state's ability to print their own money. It's just to create a credible alternative. And so, I think about, we say the words mass adoption, but we don't really define that terminology, or hyper Bitcoinization. And, I think that's better defined, but still, hard to approach. I just think in terms that, am I able to demand my paycheck in Bitcoin, and am I able to demand payment for my goods and services in Bitcoin? And once I'm able to make that demand, I'm free, because then I'm only able to engage in trade, which is fundamentally a free activity because it requires two consenting parties to engage in the exchange of a monetary good for a physical good or service, or a digital good or service. And that foundational freedom of association between two parties without a governed monetary concept stitching the property rights of those two counterparties together, that's sound money, and that's freedom ultimately, which is that I'm able to use my labor to produce something of value, and I'm able to receive the medium of value in exchange for that effort on a freedom to associate basis. That is why prosperity has proliferated across the world. And we've seen a distortion in markets because we have assigned seigniorage capabilities to a select few economies, and then the rest of the economies all over the world have a distorted view on their power relative to the seigniorage economy. And so what Bitcoin does is it's a return to the merit of the goods and the services that one group is able to produce and charge a market price for, that another group is able to purchase. And that relationship between producer and consumer, built on free rails that cannot be debased, that cannot be censored, that cannot be stopped, that is the path to a more prosperous future, because it pushes all of the incentives back to the producer to raise the quality over time. And so in order to earn Bitcoin in the future, you will have to produce a higher value good, service, or labor hour in order to earn those sats. And so that is going to fundamentally raise the quality of life on the planet.
I'm curious. I want to ask everybody here. Do we see Bitcoin being more widely used just in that capacity, like individuals incentivizing and then demanding to be paid in Bitcoin as an actual peer-to-peer currency in say the coming decade or so? Is that going to become more common? Like I ask because I'm the crazy person living on Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And so what I've kind of gone through in my path is, you're living on fiat, you're taking whatever is above and beyond your bills each month, and then you're stacking that away. And then, I started accepting Bitcoin, but like, who's going to pay me in Bitcoin? And then I started incentivizing people to pay me in Bitcoin. And I started getting some people paying me in Bitcoin. And now my default is to say, I want to be paid in Bitcoin. And if I'm not paid in Bitcoin, then I charge a premium. And so I've taken this path of like further and further disincentivizing people from paying me in fiat because I don't want it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the fiat premium best communicates the dissatisfaction I have with accepting fiat. It says to the person paying, like, here's the price. I'm assuming you're paying me in Bitcoin. And then when they say, well, I can't pay you in Bitcoin, I say, oh, well, here's the, I just use Zappright. So you just tag it on. And so when they go through the checkout, it's like, oh, there's a 15 or 20% premium on that if you're paying through this method. And I think mentally people, they will act, they're more likely to act to to save themselves from losing something they feel like they already had, instead of acting in order to gain something they never had in the first place. So when they have an anchor price and then they're like, oh, fuck that, that's 20% extra to pay in I better like at least next time figure out how to pay in Bitcoin so I don't have to get screwed here. I think this is where we might see it going, where people gradually, the ones that want Bitcoin incentivize it or have mechanisms where it auto converts for them. I don't know. Where are you guys at with this?
I once offered a friend, he was working for me for the day and his day rate was $300 and Bitcoin was around 315 or something. So I was like, hey man, I will just pay you 1 Bitcoin for today, 1 Bitcoin for 1 day's work. This was 2015. And he was like, nah, maybe if you gave me like 30% more, I would do it. I was like, no, this is the deal. 15%. I'm already giving you 15% more or whatever. So, or like 7% more. So like, you got to take it. Anyway, he didn't want it. He brings it up all the time. Every time we talk to him, he's like, dude, you should have taken that Bitcoin. So, maybe that those stories will start getting out there and people will start to think like, hey, this is a good thing to do. And I would like to be paid in Bitcoin, or have the auto convert feature. I think the more likely course we'll see over the next, like, let's say 10 or 15, 20 years is people living in a sort of a dual currency world, right? Where, people are spending in fiat and saving in Bitcoin, which is the way that most of us in Bitcoin operate. When we go out for dinner as Bitcoiners, we usually pay with our credit card because it's better to pay with ship money and keep the good money for yourself than it is to try and, be a cringy Roger Ver guy where you go around and convince every, Chinese food shop owner to fucking let you pay in Bitcoin, right? It's better to just be like, hey, you want fiat? Here's fiat, And then if people start demanding Bitcoin, you'd be like, oh, you want Bitcoin? All right, yeah, I can give you a little Bitcoin, whatever, So I think people are going to live in a dual currency state for a while, and you'll switch over. It's like an operating system for the mind, right? You have to switch over in your mind to be on a Bitcoin standard first before you start doing what you do and being like, pay me in Bitcoin, right? So I think we will see that. I don't know if it'll be widespread or commonplace, but more commonplace as we go and the price goes higher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did just see a video. Joe Hall, Joe Nakamoto. He just did a video on actually checking how many of the merchants in Madeira are really accepting Bitcoin, and every shop that he hit actually was like actively accepting Bitcoin. He went to like 10, 15 places and he didn't get a no. Yeah, which is like, I mean, I think they have like 150 something in and around throughout the island. It's not like a huge island. So, I mean, it's, I'm going there next summer. I'm spending the summer there in 2026 with the family just to kind of see what it's like. And I did go to the event there last year and it was beautiful, but I want to see what it's like to actually.
So there's more adoption there than in El Salvador, because Joe did a movie too, or a documentary thing where he went around in El Salvador seeing if people would take Bitcoin as payment, and I think most of them were not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so he was basing this on like the BTC map. Like he was going to places that were stated as accepting Bitcoin.
Right.
I wonder what I didn't see the El Salvador one. I wonder if he was just like going down the street to random shops or if he knew that they were previously accepting Bitcoin. But either way, I mean, this is kind of how it is for me. It's like I'm living on Bitcoin because I spend the time to find people that make things that I want that will accept Bitcoin, that were already Bitcoiners. And so, yeah, like I've got a dentist, I've got a plumber, I've got tradesmen that can remodel my basement. I've got farmers that bring beef to my house. I've got all these different things and I pay them directly in Bitcoin because they were Bitcoiners first. And then we just figured out, well, why don't we just deal in Bitcoin? It's so much better. So yeah, I don't, Harry, do you want to tag in anything here?
No, I just think it's like all this stuff takes time. I think that I largely agree behaviorally with Hodl that I save in Bitcoin and I try to spend in fiat. My landlord's not taking Bitcoin. and he's like whatever 70. So I think there's like a lot of you got to develop a useful strategy for your own household, and it's our job to create as much prosperity as possible. And so that means I try to end the week with more sats than I start the week. And I just try to extend that mindset over as large a landscape as possible, right? That starts in my own head. Then it starts to be in my house. Then it is in my business. Then it's in my community. Then it's in my state. And now it's in my country. And so the ability to grow a prosperous balance sheet is a lifelong exercise. And having a strong respect for your own sphere of influence and your own sphere of competence is the best way to exert your power on the world. And so I view, Bitcoin as a projection of power, because you're taking 1 hour of today's time, you're converting it into Bitcoin, and you're waking up in the future with more time value on your balance sheet. And so if you think about your life, your projection of power is just your time. And so by saving in Bitcoin, I'm able to live a 500-year life in terms of balance sheet value. And so I have this enormous ability to exert my power on the world, because I'm able to take an hour today and turn it into a year tomorrow. Hodl, I think of your buddy, 1 day rate, right? Average salary in the US is whatever, 50, 60 grand. Your person could have had 300 days or 400 days of labor generated in 1 day. And that's the projection of power over time that sound money gives you if you're able to integrate it into your personal balance sheet. And that idea extends to the corporation and extends to the nation state. And so by transmuting today's time into today's Bitcoin value gives you enormously more time in future Bitcoin value. And that relationship remains unbroken until Bitcoin eats the financial purchasing power of the entire world. And then it keeps growing because we get to be more prosperous over time. And the economies will grow and trade will continue to integrate, and the ability to innovate across the back of those more prosperous interactions only grows. And so what other choice is there? What higher or more honorable opportunity is there to take a sound balance sheet appreciating, strengthening asset and put it into the hands of yourself and into the hands of your children in a responsible way? What higher calling is there than that?
Gents,
100%.
I am conscious of time. We're going to wrap in a moment, but before we do, I want to I want to throw a question to you guys regarding what you think we might see through the rest of 2025 in terms of what do you think in your mind would be something that you think is likely to happen, but most of the world will be pretty surprised by throughout 2025. It could be an event. It could be it could be a nation state. It could be an institution. It could be some sort of seismic shift. It could be anything in and around Bitcoin that you think is likely to happen, but will surprise a lot of people. Any kind of anybody throwing their hat into the ring for that one?
Yeah, I'll go first. I still think we're likely to see north of $500,000 Bitcoin. I feel pretty confident in that. And I think, it's likely that it happens in the back half of the year. It could have happened in the beginning of the year, but like obviously there's uncertainty with the trade war stuff with Trump. So once the global economy sort of stops being uncertain, I think, a lot of liquidity will free up and we'll see that capital find its way home to Daddy Bitcoin where it belongs. and I think that we will have I still think we'll have an alt season like we typically do, and we'll have a crazy run up, and we'll have all the new people here, and we'll have all the XRP people buying boats, and they'll be like, look at me, I'm on a boat, bitch. I bought XRP.
No.
It's gonna be all the stupid shit. It's all coming. Like it's all I've seen it play out too many times. I just am pretty convinced of it. So yeah, I think we go north of 500K. Do we get to 1 million? I don't know. Maybe that could happen.
You should. Maybe you should bet Peter about it again.
I already have a bet with him.
Okay, there you go. Perfect.
It's still live. That bet is still live.
Yeah. Harry, I'll go to you, and then I'll go to Samson. What do you think could be surprising in the latter part of the year?
Surprising. I'm too jaded at this point. I just want to. You talk about the mid curve. I'm the left curve. Buy electrons, push them through hash boards, wake up with sats on the other end of them, and I'm excited for things to be boring, where we continue to secure the network, we continue to earn Bitcoin on average every 10 minutes, and I think that the greatest choice I ever made professionally was to bet on a Bitcoin native revenue business with no counterparty. I took Nick Szabo's message to heart, which is that trusted third parties are security holes. And so the extension of that idea for me was to, I just work for the Bitcoin network. I work for the algorithm, and happily so. And the ability to secure the network, and the ability to continue to participate in the value proposition that Bitcoin offers is the greatest gift, of my career.
Perfect. Samson, I'm going to cue you up for yours by saying that somebody in the chat, Lightning Goats, has a prediction, and he predicts that Samson will be called bearish with all the silly Omega talk. So with that in mind, what do you feel could surprise people in the latter part of 2025?
Well, I think my prediction. It's that we will see Omega candles, and my prediction is also we'll see 1 million in 2025. If not, then 2026. But it's coming very soon. It just has to do with all of the demand and not enough supply. And it hasn't reconciled yet. If it was going up gradually, then you can kind of visualize that the steam is being let out of the pot. It's kind of depressurizing a bit. But we're not seeing that. We're kind of hovering around at 84, accumulations at 84-ish. It doesn't seem to compute. And when things don't compute, then they reconcile very quickly. So it is that gradually, then suddenly. So maybe it's end of the year. I don't know. But it's going to reconcile, and it's going to reconcile in a very violent way.
Now, I forgot to ask you, this Omega candle that you gave me, is this meant to be lit to bring about an Omega candle, or is this like a celebratory, I light it after it's happened?
It's celebratory because the Omega candle is coming, whether you want it to or not.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Gentlemen, thank you all so much for being on the show. I just want to, everybody that tuned in, again, we've had a few thousand people across all platforms tune in to join us. Make sure you smash that like button. Really do appreciate. And I'll just wrap by saying, everybody that watched, if you do need any help in your Bitcoin learning journey, be sure to check out me and my team over at bitcoinmentor.io. That's where you can head to get one-on-one help with self-custody, multisig, home mining, running nodes, all that. Whatever tickles your fancy, we can help you. And if you scan that QR code right now, we've got a cold card masterclass where you can do a deep dive, not just on setting up your cold card, backing it up, recovering it, pairing it with Sparrow Wallet or NUNCHUK or whatever, but also a deep dive into every major advanced feature so that you become an absolute master. It's multiple hours spent on mastering the cold cards. So encourage you to check it out. Either way, gentlemen, appreciate you all. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you all soon. Everybody watching, keep stacking sats, keep stacking skills. I'm Ben with the BTC Sessions. This was your daily session. See you guys.
See ya.
See ya.